Random House Audio presents The Road to Omaha by Robert Ludlum, read for you by Scott Brick. Preface. A number of years ago, the undersigned wrote a novel entitled The Road to Gandolfo. It was based on a staggering premise, an earth-shaking concept that should have possessed the thunder of the ages, and you don't hardly come upon them things no more. It was to be a tale told by demons, the legions of Satan marching out of hell to commit a heinous crime that would outrage the world, a mortal blow to all men and women of faith, regardless of their specific religion, for it would show how vulnerable are the great spiritual leaders of our times. Stripped to its essentials, the story dealt with the kidnapping of Rome's pontiff, a true man of God and of ordinary people everywhere, Pope Francesco I. Are you with me? I mean, it's really heavy, isn't it? It should have been, but it wasn't. Something happened. Poor fool, the novelist, peeked around the edges, glimpsed the flip side of the coin, and to his eternal condemnation, he began to giggle. That's no way to treat a staggering premise, a magnificent obsession. Not too shabby a title, by the way. Unfortunately, poor fool could not help himself. He began to think, which is always dangerous for a storyteller. The what-if syndrome came into play. What if the instigator of this horrible crime wasn't actually a bad fellow, but in fiction's reality, a genuine military legend whom the politicians crippled because he vociferously objected to their hypocrisies? And what if the beloved Pope wasn't actually averse to being kidnapped, as long as his look-alike cousin, a none-too-bright spear-carrier from La Scala Opera, took his place, and the true pontiff could run the immense responsibilities of the Holy See by remote, without the debilitating agenda of Vatican politics and the endless procession of blessings administered to supplicants expecting to buy their way into heaven by way of the collection plate? Now there was another story. I can hear you. I can hear you. He sold himself down his own river of betrayal. I've frequently wondered what river the bromide refers to. The Styx, the Nile, the Amazon? Certainly not the Colorado. You'd get hung up on the whitewater rocks. Well, maybe I did, and maybe I didn't. I only know that during the intervening years since Gandolfo, a number of readers have asked me by letter, telephone, and outright threats of bodily harm, whatever happened to those clowns? The perpetrators, not the willing victim. In all honesty, those clowns were waiting for another staggering premise. And late one night a year ago, the squirreliest of my insignificant muses shrieked, "By Jove, you've got it!" I'm quite sure she stole the line. At any rate, whereas poor fool took certain liberties in the areas of religion and economics in The Road to Gandolfo, he hereby freely admits having taken similar liberties in this current scholarly tome with respect to the laws and the courts of the land. Then again, who doesn't? Of course, not my attorney or your attorney, but certainly everybody else's. The accurate novelization of authentic, undocumented history of questionable origin demands that the muse must forego certain ingrained disciplines in the search for improbable truths, and definitely where Blackstone is concerned. Yet, never fear, the moral is here. Stay out of a courtroom unless you can buy the judge. Or, if in the unlikely event you could hire my lawyer, which you can't because he's all tied up keeping me out of jail. So, to my many friends who are attorneys, they're either attorneys, actors, or homicidal killers, is there a running connection? Skip over the finer points of law that are neither fine nor very pointed. However, they may well be inaccurately accurate. Robert Ludlum. What Robert Ludlum is too modest to say is that when The Road to Gandolfo was published under his own name, it immediately became an international bestseller in 18 different countries. Readers were delighted to discover that his gift for comedy matched his talent for writing entertaining yet meaningful thrillers. The Publisher. Prologue. The flames roared up into the night sky, creating massive shadows pulsating across the painted faces of the Indians around the bonfire. And then the chief of the tribe, bedecked in the ceremonial garments of his office, his feathered headdress swooping down from his immensely tall frame to the ground below, raised his voice in regal majesty. "I come before you to tell you that the sins of the white man have brought him nothing but confrontation with the evil spirits. They will devour him and send him into the fires of eternal damnation. Believe me, my brothers, sons, sisters, and daughters, the day of reckoning is before us, and we will emerge triumphant." The only problem for many in the chief's audience was that the chief was a white man. "What cookie jar did he jump out of?" whispered an elderly member of the Wapatami tribe to the squaw next to him. "Shh," said the woman. "He's brought us a truckload of souvenirs from China and Japan. Don't louse up a good thing, Eagle Eyes." Chapter 1. The small, decrepit office on the top floor of the government building was from another era, which was to say nobody but the present occupant had used it in 64 years and 8 months. It was not that there were dark secrets in its walls or malevolent ghosts from the past hovering below the shabby ceiling. Quite simply, nobody wanted to use it. And another point should be made clear. It was not actually on the top floor, it was above the top floor, reached by a narrow wooden staircase, the kind the wives of New Bedford whalers climbed to prowl the balconies, hoping, most of the time, for familiar ships that signaled the return of their own particular Ahabs from the angry ocean. In summer months, the office was suffocating, as there was only one small window. During the winter, it was freezing, as its wooden shell had no insulation, and the window rattled incessantly, impervious to caulking, permitting the cold winds to whip inside as though invited. In essence, this room, this antiquated upper chamber with its sparse furniture purchased around the turn of the century, was the Siberia of the government agency in which it was housed. The last formal employee who toiled there was a discredited American Indian who had the temerity to learn to read English and suggested to his superiors, who themselves could barely read English, that certain restrictions placed on a reservation of the Navajo Nation were too severe. It is said the man died in that upper office in the cold January of 1927 and was not discovered until the following May, when the weather was warm and the air suddenly scented. The government agency was, of course, the United States Bureau of Indian Affairs. For the current occupant, however, the foregoing was not a deterrent, but rather an incentive. The lone figure in the nondescript gray suit huddled over the roll-top desk, which wasn't much of a desk, as all its little drawers had been removed and the rolling top was stuck at half-mast, was General MacKenzie Hawkins, military legend, hero in 3 wars and twice winner of the Congressional Medal of Honor. This giant of a man, his lean muscular figure belying his elderly years, his steely eyes and tanned leather-lined face perhaps confirming a number of them, had once again gone into combat. However, for the first time in his life, he was not at war with the enemies of his beloved United States of America, but with the government of the United States itself, over something that took place 112 years ago. It didn't much matter when, he thought, as he squeaked around in his ancient swivel chair and propelled himself to an adjacent table piled high with old leather-bound ledgers and maps. They were the same pricky shits who had screwed him, stripped him of his uniform, and put him out to military pasture. They were all the goddamn same, whether in their frilly frock coats of 100 years ago or their piss-elegant, tight-assed pinstripes of today. They were all pricky shits. Time did not matter, nailing them did. The general pulled down the chain of a green-shaded goose-necked lamp, circa early 20s, and studied a map in his right hand, a large magnifying glass. He then spun around to his dilapidated desk and reread the paragraph he had underlined in the ledger whose binding had split with age. His perpetually squinting eyes suddenly were wide and bright with excitement. He reached for the only instrument of communication he had at his disposal, since the installation of a telephone might reveal his more than scholarly presence at the Bureau. It was a small cone attached to a tube. He blew into it twice, the signal of emergency.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?